Hey everybody, I'm Bob Bakert with Jazz Guitar today, and we're trying to make this be impromptu, even though we've been setting it up for about a half an hour. So we'll go from there. What a wonderful surprise and honor it is for me to be called and asked to be a part of this really celebration of John Pisano. I mean, I can't tell you there's so much you could talk about when you talk about John. I mean, I'm like I'm almost speechless with this. I really am, and I'm not being a phony about it. John played with so many people. I mean, the list of people that he recorded with. Let me give you this for just a second. For people that don't know, there's a lot of information about him, of course, on the website. But everybody from Ryan Adams, Gato Barbieri, Tony Bennett, Lenny Breau, Michael Bublé, Frank Camp, Roy Clark, Natalie Cole, Sam Cooke. I keep going down the line here. Dan Hicks, Paul Horn, Diana Krall. Are any of these names familiar to y'all? Barry Manilow, Howard Roberts, Kenny Rogers. I mean, this list is just huge. And not to say that he didn't also tour and record with Herb Alpert, Peggy Lee, Sergio Mendes, and of course, Joe Pass. He had an amazing career, of course, as a professional musician. But the other thing that he did, which is kind of what we want to talk about more today, is what he did for jazz guitar by having the guitar night, the John Pisano guitar night, for all those years. And if you're not familiar with the John Pisano guitar night, please go onto YouTube and watch, because there's a million YouTubes of John playing. And John's playing was pretty incredible. I mean, he reminds me almost of an organ player. His chords and his rhythm, and he did a whole lot of ands and ins, and it was just tremendous, tremendous playing. And he organized this thing, and I'm going to let people that know more about the specifics of it talk about it. But I got to know him when I was director over at Eastman Guitars, and I was there for a couple of years after I retired. And John, of course, has an Eastman guitar, and got to know him, and we talked an awful lot. He invited me out for pizza. I never made it. I regret that, but I wish I could have made it. Always had great conversations with him. When you got on the phone with John, it was an hour. You just count on it. I mean, he was just that kind of guy. I mean, he was your uncle, even though he wasn't your uncle. I mean, he was your uncle. Um, and so we're being joined today by his lovely bride, Jeanne Pisano. I'm gonna wave at him, Jeanne. Thank you. John Storie, and most of you know who John is. And of course, the lovely lady with the blonde hair, Beth Marlis, who doesn't really need a whole lot of introduction. She's been a staple on the West Coast guitar scene for forever and ever and ever, and at Guitar Institute, and taught thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And so it's an honor to be here. What I want to do is I want to turn this over to Beth and kind of describe what you'd like us to know about John.
Well, first, Bob, thank you for doing this. It's really our honor to be here and share this with you, and to contribute just one little bit more to John's legacy and his memory. And it's a lot going on today, and today is very auspicious in a lot of ways, as we'll get to. But I will share what I can and my experience of John, which probably of the three of us is the least, believe it or not. I've made them laugh, but it's probably true. You talked about regretting not getting the pizza with John. Well, I don't have a lot of regrets in life. That's sort of not how I roll, but I have one, and that is, for years, John would ask me to come play at guitar night, and I always politely refused. Oh, I'm too busy. Da 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 da. I never did it,
Oh
and
boy.
yeah, I regret that
Yeah, I
because
can see why.
you
Yeah,
can.
I hate to, rarely do I ever pile on, Beth, but I get it.
Yeah.
I
So
really do.
I'm happy though that, through all the people that got to be a part of it, it lives on in them and they're playing and all the glowing kind of honestly the love that they have for John and for that particular world and community he created on top of an absolutely stellar career is just second to none. So my part of this, my experience of John in person was a memory you mentioned GIT, where I've been there since several 100 years now, and uh, john John used to come into the school, not unaccompanied though. He would come with Joe Pass, come to GIT in the 80s, and they would sit in a room and play together. It was called open counseling. It's like office hours. Drop in. Anybody could come in and play with Joe Pass, but not really, because Joe wouldn't let anybody comp for him except John Pisano. So John, so all of us, and this goes back to my day of being a student in 1985. I remember going in the room and, oh, I get to play with Joe Pass. It was exciting and terrifying. But really, it was equally incredible to hear John playing together with the perfect accompaniment, the perfect moment, and who Joe would trust. Joe wouldn't trust any old GIT student or even faculty member to comp for him. And that speaks volumes, I think, to the quality of John's playing and the rapport that those two shared. I did actually play with. I'll just throw in a quick one about Joe Pass. I did play with him, and one of my great lessons in playing with Joe Pass at that point in my life. I can tell you another story about when I was younger. I took a lesson from him, but in my 20s, I played in this open counseling with Joe, and we were playing a blues, and he stopped me right in the middle of the solo, and he said, "Why'd you play that B flat? Tell me, what are you doing there? Stop! Why'd you play that B flat?" I was mortified. Mortified. I couldn't explain it. I mean, I was not very good. I don't know. Uh, but the lesson, sort of subtext of it all was that if you can't explain or vouch for everything you play, then you're not going to be a professional. If you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, where it is in the flow, or leading to somewhere, then get out of the room. That's kind of what he was telling me. It was a little harsh lesson, but I'll have to say to this day I never forgot it. And again, I loved it. Was like really a sort of spiritual thing to go into that room and have John and Joe there playing, almost every week for a while. So
Wow.
that's my experience. It's um, embedded in my DNA in a very deep way, and I know the two people next to me have very deep experience with who John is, was, continues to be, how he lives on, and I might pass the baton to Jeanne Pisano, because who knows more than Jeanne, if you feel like you'd like to start anywhere and talk
Well,
about John.
I'm not sure what. Thank you, Beth. That was interesting.
Yeah,
I did
thanks, Bob.
those stories.
It's embarrassing. It's like,
That's great.
Not at all. Not at
I
all.
love that story.
You were a
That's-
kid. You learned.
That's great. Different time.
Wonder.
Yeah.
And I too want to echo Beth. Thank you so much, Bob, for doing this. It's lovely to
Um,
for you to honor John this way, and I appreciate it deeply. Thank you.
I'm truly honored. And I mean that sincerely. And maybe before you know, Beth, you said second to none when you talk about a career, and so often that phrase is tossed out, and you go, but truly, John's career as a jazz guitarist was second to none. Anyway, Jeanne, I'm sorry I interrupted you. So
No,
please.
not at all. No, he had a remarkable life, and as his wife, I stood in awe of all that he had accomplished, and always considered it a privilege that we were able to work together musically as the Flying Pisanos. I always took it as an honor and a privilege, because he was just no one accompanied or arranged for vocal and guitar the way he did. I was re-listening to a CD we did back in 2000. Not only was his playing magnificent, but the subtleties and the amazing we didn't arrange, but he always had structure and he knew what he wanted to do, and he did it, He was an absolute master, just phenomenal. I continue to be in awe of his mastery of so many different aspects of music, and not to mention his love of the instrument itself, the guitar. I mean, as you know, he created the John Pisano model for Eastman with his friend Ted Mayer, who couldn't be here with us today because of a severe back problem. But um, he loved the instrument, and he never stopped tweaking it and wanting it to be better and better. John, in his own way, was a perfectionist. He was very detail oriented. And this
I'm,
was
I'm laughing because yes, he was. I had to deal with him on that guitar, and it was like, I don't want that red wire to be red. I think I like it blue. I mean, it was like crazy. I mean, in a good way. It was always to improve, always to improve, always to improve. Please.
absolutely. He put you guys at Eastman through their paces. I know that.
Oh, I loved him. I loved his calls. I loved talking to him. You mentioned about arranging for voice. I studied voice in college as an opera major, as a classical major for a while, and I also studied jazz guitar. And I'm not going to say I was any good at either one of those two, but I did try real hard. And I can tell you this, that try, a guitar player accompanying a vocalist is extremely difficult to do
Yes, it is.
because they sit in the same bandwidth. And staying out of as you're as a singer, you can appreciate that. I mean, I know you can. And so when you say that, I want people to understand that you just don't play the chords and accompany a vocalist. You really got to come up with voicings that give the singer space to move and allow their timbre to be fully realized, and the guitar can just take it right out of it. And so that's a huge skill to have.
It's an
Uh,
art.
yeah, it is. It truly is an art, and obviously Joe Pass did it really well. Um, but there's a lot of guitar players out there that really that's they're good at a whole lot of things, but that's just not one of them. And to be good at it is you have to have a real ear and understand timbre and bandwidth and all those things.
No, I was talking about, that he was detail oriented, and Joe, the complete master that he was of the guitar and solo playing as no one does, and talk about, or ever did, and talk about arranging on the spot. But when they worked together and recorded together, John was the one that always pulled everything together, because Joe was just, oh, let's just go do it.
Right.
Because that's Joe. And it worked for Joe. But John knew you had to have a little bit of structure. And the joke that they had, Joe wrote something to John one time saying how he was his favorite guitarist to work with, and he said, "Thanks for putting up with all my BS, and I promise one day I'll rehearse."
No, he's not. Oh,
Never happened, but
That's
that,
funny.
that's neither here nor there. They managed to accomplish quite a body of work together. But John loved Joe like no other that I had known in the guitar world. He worshipped him, and
oh,
was stated when he passed. But his John took great pride in the fact that Joe thought so much of him that he would write those things and would say those things to him, and genuinely meant it. It was he was immensely proud of that,
well,
and felt like he lost a part of himself when Joe died.
yeah, I can see that for sure. There's an Italian kinship going on there, that transcends pizza and lasagna. So it's a big deal. It really is a
Joe
big deal.
John's red sauce because he never put onions in it.
I was gonna.
Oh, that was important to Joe. I gotta tell you.
I'm sorry I didn't hear that.
That was important to Joe Pass.
To do what? To do what?
No
You-
onions, no onions in the marinara. Now, I think that
No.
sitting at might be the site of many meals
Oh,
where
there were
Joe
many.
Pass and John and you
Joe sat right
at
there.
this table,
Right
yeah, you
there
had
next
dinners
to
and-
you, Beth. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And Ellen was at the end of the table, his wife. Yes. And there were many, and Frank Potenza was here with Joe and John and Ellen and me. We've had many, many meals. And John would cook for Joe. I mean, he, and that's why, and Joe would always say something about the way the parsley had to be cut, as if John didn't know how he wanted it cut.
Wow.
But they had, John discovered Joe when Joe was at Synanon. He'd heard about this fantastic guitar player, so he went out to Synanon so that he could meet him, play with him, hang. And Joe always told the story of one of the reasons that John remained so important in his life was because he looked at John and he saw an Italian guitar player, musician, and a family man able to get a home together, have a family, have a career. And he really admired that because, of course, his days before he got clean and sober were quite chaotic and um, really quite something. Actually, I don't know if it's okay to say this or not, but
Sure it is.
it is. He had some amazing stories about when he was out there and strung out, and they're absolute war stories. I mean, he would say, "I would steal from anybody."
Is this
anything.
John or Joe?
This
Or
is
both?
Joe.
This
So
is
that's
Joe.
Joe.
Talking about Joe.
John, because John's mother always told him, you can't be a jazz musician because they're all junkies. And of course, John very luckily never succumbed to any of those temptations. He never fell into that trap. But poor Joe struggled with it for a long time. And once he was clean, everything soared for him. And,
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that at that very table that you sat there many, many nights with, with two of the finest guitar players in the world, just having, I'm sure, a glass of wine or two and a meal or three. And I mean, I find that to be there's something holy about that space, if you will. That's how I feel about it. I get kind of like, wow, this is where they did that. This is they. It's kind of nuts. Before we move on to John Storie, who's sitting there, because I want to talk about John's playing in a bit. I know that you know a lot about that, but Frank Vignola, who has the guitar night in Birdland in New York City, East Coast, credits John Pisano 100% for what's happening at Birdland in New York. I mean, he makes no bones about it. He'll tell anybody, and he loved John. And in fact, he recently told me about we're talking because I talk to Frank fairly often, and he told me about a night when he came or a time when he came out there, and John made him food, pizza, I believe, the famous pizza, and they sat and then they recorded. They made a bunch of recordings, the two of them, just playing tunes, and so then Frank says to me, I wonder if that tape exists. I wonder if I can. He found it.
ah,
He's
well,
got it, and we're trying to. He's trying to figure out what to do with it because it is a gem. I've heard it. I actually had it. He sent me a copy, and I want to talk to Frank. I mean, Frank. I told him we were going to do something about this, but it's been a while. I might have to remind him. But maybe we can bring that in because it's the two of them just playing tunes, and it's they just ate, they just had some wine, they did whatever, well, I'm not sure what other alcohol or whatever, and they were really really playing just for each other, and
Wow.
it's beautiful. I mean, it is really, really beautiful. And I know that Frank wants to make sure that it gets its proper respect, if you know what I mean. So I'm just letting you know that that does exist, and I want you to know that Guitar Night in New York City is a hit. It's always perennially sold out. It's a destination now. People, when you go to New York, you got to go to Guitar Night. And I'm not talking about just guitar players. I mean, it's the public in New York City that go there and check it out. And that's 100% inspired by what John did, on the West Coast. I mean, if there was no John Pisano, there'd be no Guitar Night in New York City. You follow what I'm saying? So
Right.
it's his legacy is continuing, and his influence is continuing, and all of that, all the love and respect and appreciation for John is alive and well in New York City on a stage. I'm not saying it's not alive and well in all other parts of the world, but I'm just saying in New York City there's a demonstrative, actual example of his influence and the inspiring things that he did right there, still going strong. And if anybody gets a chance to tune into Birdland on Wednesday night, it's also everything's archived on YouTube. You can check it out. It's all free, and he gets some of the world's greatest guitar players in there. I mean, Pasquale Grasso, and I could go on and on with the list. I'll leave people out if I start naming people, but that's
Robert, an amazing legacy you're talking about, and I personally here in Los Angeles watch those all the time. I get, I know I'm not alone, but I do want to not let things go by without mentioning, since we're
please.
talking legacy and archives and John's music. One of the things I didn't know until 6 or 8 months ago about John is he was really meticulous, as you've mentioned, but he also had filing cabinets of arrangements and incredible things he wrote, and was very, very sort of studious about it. Almost, I wouldn't say academic because that sounds a little cold, but he really was very highly organized and had an amazing collection, which I'm very happy to say, under the auspices and allowance of Jeanne, that it's been donated to the Los Angeles Jazz Archives, and that's a long-term process where they're going
Wow.
to make these things available, which not only include obviously written material, but I have a feeling some spectacular recordings, even on very old formats. They have the gear to be able to go back and reach back into time and make this stuff available. So in the future, something to look forward to.
Wow, that's incredible.
I know John, even I think he wouldn't be upset if we said he took a lesson or lessons with Ted Green. Even
he
recorded that.
He loved Ted Green.
He recorded so many.
Sure.
I mean, it was stunning when you showed me some of the recordings. And so I think it's going to make people's jaw drop in the future, just throwing that little bit out there. So that's a very exciting thing. And we have some other exciting stuff I hope we get to. I know we haven't allowed John to say a piece.
Well, yeah, I was going to say,
This is so fun for me to get to hear everybody talk about John. And yeah, John represents the root system of jazz guitar. He is really at the tree trunk of all of us. And I met him in the early 2000s when I came down here to study at SC, and Guitar Night was really in a peak. It had various times and periods where at various venues in town, but Spazio's was a fine dining establishment. People were dressed to the nines. You'd walk in there and there'd be guys like Chuck Niles, who's a very famous radio DJ here in LA for decades. Orchestrators, guys like Kurt Berg, who's a famous copyist in town, did work for John Williams. He would come down there and have a drink and listen to the guitar players. And the first night I was there, not to drop names or anything, but just to share with our jazz guitar audience, just to give you an idea, I remember walking in and I saw at a table Andy Summers, Steve Lukather, and Ted Green all talking about Jimmy Weibel. And I was like, wait a minute, that's the guitarist from Toto. Oh my God, that's the guy from the Police. And I went pale white, and I was there in my USC hoodie and shorts. And our department chair, Richard Smith, was there. And he walked up to me and he said, okay, now that you're in LA, you should go get a blazer. And, people wear blazers and jeans to stuff like this. And that was my introduction to LA. And John was so kind. He would have me and the guys at USC sitting in anytime we came. And so another funny story was about in 2012 or 13, when it had moved over to Vitello's for a minute. John was bringing smaller and smaller amps to the gig, so it was easier for him to haul the amp in. And I said, man, I would be honored to haul your amp and set your amp up for you. And he's like, oh, really? Okay, cool. See you next week. I showed up next week, and he had his old Polytone 102 with two ceramic speakers in the back. This amp weighed like 80 pounds. And he said, thanks for hauling my amp for me. This is great. And then he said, I'm kidding. I've got my Razor's Edge that weighs like 6 pounds. Just take that. And that was his.
How did he get that into the trunk of his car is what I want to know.
I remember he's like, I got my Polytone 102. Thanks for setting my amp up. And, he had a great sense of humor. And, I will say this before we move on, because I know, again, we do want to talk about this unbelievable instrument and Joe, too.
Right.
John represented an era of common sense amongst a lot of musicians that we just don't see this anymore. He was such a great accompanist. And I learned so much about accompanying from John as well. He's a fine soloist, of course, and an amazing jazz guitar player. And everywhere you'd go around the planet, whether you were in the Netherlands or Germany or wherever, people would always say, oh, you're from LA, how's guitar night? Yeah. And John also, he really promoted guitar players, and how great that we all play an instrument like this. And John brought the community together and showed us all how great guitar sounds with guitar. And that is so unique. We don't get that on any other instrument. You don't see drummers having drummer night or piano night or saxophone night.
No.
And I know I'm going to try really hard in my career, wherever this career takes me. I'm always going to try to do some kind of guitar gig where I play with other guitar players in honor of John, because he showed me so much about the orchestration. I think in the long run, people will think of him like an Andres Segovia on our instrument, to be honest. I think he really is somebody that showed us how great the guitar sounds in a variety of situations. And again, he was so straightforward, and we could all learn to be a little bit more straightforward in this world of tons of academia and jazz. And he just was so good at what he did, and we should all strive to be like that. And I pick up the guitar.
Let me ask you a question about John's playing for a minute, and both of you guys can jump in. What was it specifically as you can? What was it about John's playing that made him so in demand from so many top artists? Why?
We can go down. I'll just say real quick, John's time feel was amazing. When you played with him, the feel was so good, and it was from another world. I'm not kidding.
No. I mean, that's probably a good description. I also think he was encyclopedic. I mean, whatever was necessary. If you call him to a session, you're not going to have to do, probably more than one take ever. Variety, you were going down alphabetically of all the recordings and people he worked with, and to have that ability, that diversity at that high a level, is pretty spectacular. But I agree, you're talking about time, space, feel, listening, beautiful voicings moving from one to the next in a very orchestral way, as you talked about. Not, as we're all guitar players, not easy for us. And for him,
it's interesting you say that, because when you can have a guitar player that's worked with Ryan Adams and Sergio Mendes, I mean, I could go on, Manhattan Transfer, Barbra Streisand. I mean, all these people, and obviously they loved what he did. I mean, it's, is that what you wanted, Mr. Producer? Yes, that's not only what I wanted, but I got another gig next week. You got to be on it, because it's a completely different, I mean, it's pretty tremendous. And what I was saying earlier is that I would agree with you, John, that his sense of rhythm and time was just second to none. It was.
You also have to remember, John was really a part of the wrecking crew of guys in LA with Howard and all those guys. He was on a lot of sessions. And as somebody who's an LA guitar player, and it's so different now, because once you know the producer, they just call you up to do the track in your house. and people get to know you for one thing, so they hire
Right.
you for that, so you get better at that.
Right.
And we've got guys like Andrew Sinwick who are amazing, who would hang at Guitar Night, and he does all the Disney stuff, and he does a variety of guitar sounds. But it's just John came from that era where you were a guitar player and you showed up and did a TVQ and then did this, and
Right.
John loved telling the stories about picking up the checks at the old Union and standing in line with Tommy Johnson, the famous tubaist who was on the Jaws soundtrack. And these guys all knew each other, and it was a small community of musicians. It was maybe 300 musicians in our union at the time,
Yeah.
and loved sharing those stories with the young guitar players. And I'm so honored that he would do that and take that time, because not everybody's super forthcoming, and people stick in their generation. And John was always asking about new guitar players. I remember when Gilad Hexelman came to town, he went down to Lucy's to watch him because he was fascinated with his playing. I mean, we should all strive to be like that, and to expand, always be listening and learning. And yeah, again, it gets me emotional thinking about it. I miss him.
That's such a beautiful point. And also to really support, constantly holding the door open,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
not like, my work is done, I have this great career, and then you sort of go off to your house and nobody hears from you again. He stayed in the scene, he made a bigger scene, he was so inclusive and I think humble. And that's the thing, you're talking about guitarists and the industry today. It's like we could all go back to study, these iconic players and how they moved in the world and who they were and sort of their attitude, because it's a really important part of it. It's all together.
There's a few people in this planet that their sheer presence commands a respect for wherever they are. In other words, when they walk into a room, it's like, all of a sudden something's happening in this room. And John was that way. I mean, when he showed up, he wasn't loud, he wasn't boisterous, he wasn't, any of those things. But you just knew that somebody important was in the room with you, and you knew that somebody important was, and somebody that mattered. Somebody, I mean, I hate, boy, that's an awful thing to say about human beings, but somebody that really, you understand what I'm saying? That you just somebody that just, wow, I want to know that guy. I want to understand that guy. I want to be in the presence of that guy. I'd like to be that guy's friend. I mean, he just had that commanding presence of, he knew who he was from my point of view, and it was just, wherever he was, it was, the stage that they were on, there was reverence for that stage. When it could be a 10,000 seat hall, or it could be a 25 seat, restaurant, but there's complete reverence for what's going on the stages he was on, because of the power of his energy, of his commitment to the craft. It was important. If he was there, it was important. Something good was going on.
There's this idea of John and younger guitarists and all of that. As you pointed out, he worked with Diana Krall on that really lovely project, The Live in Paris, and with Klaus Augerman arrangements and all of that. And Tommy LaPuma was the one who produced that album, and he called John in on it. And when they did the recording and all of that, and um, when they took it to Paris, Tommy called him because Anthony Wilson had been playing with Diana Krall. But anyway, for the gig in Paris, in which they were going to do a live recording on, Tommy calls John and says, "Listen, this kid Anthony," he said, John was playing acoustic guitar because of the Brazilian stuff on this album,
Hmm.
but Anthony was doing the rhythm, and but Tommy didn't trust it, and he said, "John," he said, "we're going to Paris." He said, "You need your acoustic guitar. Bring your electric guitar just in case this kid can't." John said to Tommy, he said, "You're really going to make me carry two guitars? I'm telling you, the kid can make it. You don't have to worry. Trust me." And Tommy said, "No, no, bring your So we ended up going to Paris with 2 guitars because Tommy wasn't sure about Anthony Wilson.
That's funny.
And of course, it worked out beautifully. And, I mean, Anthony played his behind off, and John always laughed about that. But he was so supportive. I mean, you know, he never for a moment said to Tommy, "Yeah, you're right. He might." It was just the opposite. You got nothing to worry about.
Generosity. That's it right there. So let's talk about the guitars a little bit. You guys have got 2 real special instruments that you want to show us, and I know that in addendum to what we're doing, you guys are going to be doing some playing on those guitars, and we're going to add that to the story here. So, John, you've got the. Why don't you tell them what that guitar is and what's going on with it?
Sure. So this instrument, I'm very honored to have purchased, is a guitar that John had from Eastman. It's a 910 model Eastman, so it's kind of a higher end model Eastman at the
Top of
time.
the line.
Yeah, and it's a really cool guitar. And it's from the front, it looks very standard. It's a 17-inch acoustic arch top, like a lot of the Eastman arch tops. On the back, though, what we have are all sorts of signatures from a very special night in 2007, honoring the great Al Viola. And Al Viola, as many of you know, he played mandolin on The Godfather. He played on a variety of other soundtracks, played with Sinatra for, 25, 30 years. He played with Frank Sinatra. And Al had passed, and they did a special guitar night in 2007. And Ed Benson featured this guitar in Just Jazz Guitar. There's photos in that episode, in that magazine of the night that they're all signing it. And we're talking Anthony Wilson, Bob Bain, Lee Rittenauer, Dennis Budimir, good old Barry Zweig, and you know, all sorts of great players on here. Dan
And
Sawyer.
John Storie.
Oh,
Ah,
well,
Yeah.
if I do say so. Anyway, but so yeah, I got the instrument and I just picked it up yesterday because I wanted to add another layer of lacquer so
Yeah.
that these stickers wouldn't fade away, because with Sharpie pen, and it'll,
Protect
as many
the
of you guys
signatures.
have artist signed guitars, they'll fade away. And Ted Mayer, who, as you know, worked with Eastman for a long time, designed John's guitar in 2003, the John
Right.
Pisano model. Ted got a pickup on here and some nice knobs, so I'm really excited to have this guitar and to gig with it and to teach on it. As we all know over Zoom, I won't demonstrate because it won't come across with any justice, but it's got a punch to it. And it's a really cool guitar. Ted Mayer mentioned that Mark Lacey, the great luthier, he was working with Eastman around this time and may have, and most likely had helped carve this top, because the top is pretty amazing. Whoever carved this really knew how to carve a guitar. And yeah, so this is the Eastman Al Viola tribute guitar from 2007, and yeah, it's now added to the stable.
I wonder if Otto D'Ambrosio built worked. I don't know. Otto is a tremendous luthier who does all the work, the design work and all that kind of stuff for Eastman, and builds unbelievable instruments on his own. I wonder if, but I will say that I mean, I don't know who built it, but they've put out some pretty good instruments in the past. And
I'll close, and then we'll move on to this amazing other instrument.
Yeah, right.
Today. John called me when I was a student at USC in 2003, and he said, "Hey, I've got this new guitar that Eastman's going to make for me, and it's going to be just the John Pisano signature."
Right.
And he said, "Hey, you know, are you in need of a new instrument?" And at the time, I was playing like an Epiphone Casino, and
Yeah.
I said, "Man, I would love to get one." And I almost got it. I ended up buying a different guitar at the time. But he called me and he talked to me like he was so excited to talk about the design of this guitar. And he specifically told me, he said, "I want an instrument that students are really proud of and something that they can grow into, because I don't feel like there's anything else out there like that. And I really like Eastman." And at the time, Eastman was just making that one violin finished
The one
the
mouth. Yeah.
piece and no name on the headstock. And Ted and John were like, "These are the guys to do this." So it's pretty cool. That could be kind of a cool segue to talk about.
Yeah, let's get with. Thank you for that, John. I really appreciate it. So Beth, you've got one amazing historically significant instrument to show us. Want to pull that out and tell us what we
Absolutely, absolutely happy to do it. It's not every day that we can document, memorialize, and share such a special guitar, not only its history, but its future. So I'm going to reach down here and bring this out. As John said earlier, my 13-year-old self is freaking out. I think my 14-year-old self is freaking out. Moment. And this particular guitar is known as the Joe Pass Custom 175, 1992, built one of two that were ever made. And I'm told the other prototype, it's a prototype. The other prototype, I don't know if it's in the ether somewhere, it probably disappeared. This is the one that Joe played his last guitar that he had made just for him to his specs, which meant without getting deep in the woods, and you can't really tell on a Zoom, but it's a little narrower. I should have measured. I'm guessing probably 2.5 to 2 3/4 inches. The neck, I just played on it a few minutes ago, and I can't even begin to find the words to tell you how great the neck feels. It's a little smaller, a little narrower. I think it's a 1 11/16 nut.
Mhm.
The guitar is absolutely beautiful in terms of it's laminated, but, and again, you won't see it on the Zoom so well, but fantastic flame everywhere you look, and a single pickup. So I think maybe different than a Herb Ellis. I don't really know. I'm not an aficionado of Gibsons. I play different brand of guitars, but that I think he asked for the pickup to be moved a little closer to the fretboard. A few modifications. This is his guitar. There are videos on the internet of him playing it. There's photos of him. This is, to some people, a holy grail guitar. It is absolutely as rare can be, with the best mojo.
Oh yeah.
Better than money can buy, my friend.
Oh yes.
It's absolutely extraordinary. And I'm just excited to hold it in my lap. It really is tremendous. And the future, since we talked a bit about the past, is talk about outcomes and happy endings. The guitar was very well loved and taken care of by John Pisano. And as I'm told, legend is that once a year for 30 years, because he became the steward of this guitar in 1994 when Joe Pass passed away, John took care of it for 30 years, and every year on Joe's birthday, he would bring it out and invite people to play it. So there's lots of fantastic DNA all over this guitar, not just Joe Pass's. I think he might have brought it to Guitar Night.
Oh, he
sometimes.
did.
I was
On
at that.
Joe's birthday.
Ah,
On
yeah.
Joe's
Okay, so
birthday,
he brought it, yeah.
always.
And I heard even maybe sometimes towards the end, there were students, he'd have students come up to the house.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
play.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, I mean, so much love, so much put into this particular guitar that it's off the charts. The outcome I'm referring to previously about what's going to be the future and what happens with this, I love that this guitar is not going into a collection. It's not going to be locked away behind plexiglass. It's not going to a museum. All good. No, this guitar is going to continue to be loved and played and shared and have music flow through it. And so very, very excited and happy
Well,
that this is this.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. I'm going to say where it's going to end up. But the Archtop Foundation has graciously become the new owner and caretaker of this special instrument. And what that means is that it's going to be passed on to players over and over and over again, a year at a time. As with the blue guitars, the Archtop Foundation has had this incredible program of putting fantastic instruments in great players, high-end professionals, up-and-coming worthy students like at Juilliard or what have you. And they have this amazing thing in Brooklyn coming up, I think, in June, the Guitar Feast or something, yes. And this will be there. This guitar will be played by, I don't know who, but very soon someone is going to be the new steward of this guitar for a year, and it will be passed on to the next and the next and the next. And what a fantastic future for
Yeah.
such a special instrument. I just can't even, thank the lucky stars that made this happen, because this guitar deserves it. If it's a living thing,
Yeah.
and I think it is, that's what's going to happen. So today's the day where this guitar is going to start its new life. And thank you to the Pisanos and to Jeanne for watching over this guitar for 30 years. And
yeah.
John loved it, and he felt reverent towards it. And I didn't mean
Absolutely.
to go on and on about it,
No,
but you know, I
no.
could talk for a long time. And John, or you know, did you want to add?
You know, there was one little thing I wanted to add. We all might know how the funny story about the Epiphone Joe passed too. Right? That Joe only played that guitar on that Hot Licks video, and we don't have. It seems like Joe didn't play that Epiphone Joe Pass ever, right? And yet the Epiphone Joe Pass is a great guitar. I've had a lot of students have. I had one. Yeah, a great guitar.
Yeah.
But Joe, they put his name on it. The guy who had designed that guitar had been with Ibanez prior to Epiphone, and that was going to be an Ibanez design for another artist. And then they ended up using it as the Epiphone Joe Pass 2. And this guitar was made in 1992, 2 years before Joe passed away. And if you guys could see up close what I'm seeing, like on the pickup and on the neck, this guitar was played so much. And it only was in Joe's hands probably for really a year and a half.
Mhm.
And it just kind of is blowing me away how much Joe must have loved this design, because this is what the 175 probably should have always been. It's really comfortable. The pickup's in the right place. Most of us only use one pickup unless you're Steve Howe and playing two pickups on your 175. And this guitar is so cool. And why Gibson didn't keep making this one, I don't know.
It's crazy.
And
It feels so good. I'm
Yeah.
just going to tell you, Scout's honor. It
It's a-
feels perfect.
And in 92, I'll say, 1992, this is when the Gibson custom shop stuff is starting to happen. There isn't really a custom shop yet. Jim Triggs is the archtop guy making the L5s at this time. So I'm sure Jim had something to do with this. And, you know, Gibson was really giving time to the jazz guitar community still when they did this, because I can't imagine now Gibson taking time to do a new artist signature for a young jazz guitarist. So it's really a unique point in Gibson history. And also, I think this is the 175 that always should have been.
You know, we should have been. I mean, I think they did the Herb Ellis a couple years before.
But thicker.
But this one,
you know?
thicker. And this one just got it absolutely right. And so it really is one of one. It's fantastic. I'm seeing another guitar off in the periphery. I'm going to set.
Yeah.
I want to say a couple words about that guitar before we move on. Hang on to that instrument. So the 175, you know, they're wonderful instruments, but exactly the things that are fixed on that guitar are the things that didn't work for me with that guitar. It had little too much mid range because of where the pickup was placed. The neck wasn't quite right, and the body was very uncomfortable to sit and play. And you know, so I want to. Is this another Archtop Foundation guitar?
One that Jeanne, I'll hold if this is probably more comfortable. If you would like to talk about this very, 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 also very special guitar.
Well, no, go ahead. I mean,
Oh, well-
the main thing about it was John's father's guitar.
John Pisano.
Oh,
And-
wow.
John's father's guitar. And
Wow.
we have this is how organized John was. He kept the original bill of sale from when John's father bought the guitar back in the, 40.
It was
40s.
1939. The provenance is unbelievable
Yeah,
because
yeah.
there's the receipt.
Yeah,
And I think he
that's-
paid what his dad paid $150 or
Yeah,
something
something
like
like
that. This is
that,
an
but-
Epiphone Deluxe, 1939.
Yeah, 1939.
86 years old, but it's not done because it also has one of those fantastic outcomes for the future. It's going to be also
So is that part of the Archtop Foundation program?
part of the program, and it'll be passed on again in June. How cool is that? 1939 Epiphone Deluxe in fantastic. You know, it's got mojo. It's got some finish checking. It's got everything you want in a 86-year-old guitar, and it plays great and sounds great. And somebody, most likely someone, I guess, on the East Coast. But we got to get this happening here, right, John?
Oh my God.
Well, let me talk a little bit about the Archtop Foundation. I'm not going to pretend to be the expert on the Archtop Foundation, but I will say this, that when I was at Eastman, and they had primarily made their bones making, you know, archtop guitars, that's where they got started. They literally got out of Bob Benedetto's book and started making guitars, with his blessing, by the way. I could not give those guitars away. I could not give away jazz guitars. Nobody was interested. I literally came up with a program. If you were a student and your teacher would sign off on it, I gave such a discount on that. You almost got the guitar for free. Nobody took me up on it. I let almost every teacher, every university and college professor around the country know that, hey, your students, if they want a real, we can do it for them. So the recordings and the amount of the size of the jazz guitar market commercially was I'm talking about the music now. The recorded music was so small because at the time jazz was about a little over 1%. Jazz total, I'm talking piano, saxophones, the whole 9 yards, was about 1% of the music market, and guitar is probably maybe 1/15 of that, 1/20th. And so it was dead, dead, and that's what kind of gave us the idea to come up with jazz guitar today, to try to not have it be dead. That's almost, we're on, I think, our 7th year of doing this. So along, and I knew about the blue guitars, the Chinnery collection, and all that kind of stuff, and it kind of went dormant for quite some time. And Rudy's had them over there, and all of that, and then all of a sudden, there's a new force, enters the world, enters the cosmos, called the Archtop Foundation, that um, decided to be, I don't know, an angel for the archtop guitar, and just they had the wherewithal to be able to acquire the instruments. They bought the Chinnery collection. They started moving it around the country. They started loaning it out. They've displayed it at shows, and people have been able to play those instruments. They've commissioned new instruments to be made, because now that those guitars were made, what, 20 something years ago. They've taken it upon themselves to younger luthiers to commission new instruments to be part of the collection. So the collection is now growing. Obviously, they've incorporated a whole lot of other instruments. So I think it's a tremendous thing. If you're not familiar with the Archtop Foundation, I think you should go to their website, which is pretty easy to find. And if you can't find that, just go to theblueguitars.com, and that'll get you started. So I want to say a big thank you to the Archtop Foundation for what they've done for the world of archtop guitars and jazz guitar in general. It's tremendous. It's tremendous. If it wasn't for them, this whole thing would not, it would not be happening. It just wouldn't be happening. And it's a real gift to the planet. I know that sounds kind of big, but it's and hyperbolic, but it's really not. It's a gift to the planet and the culture of all peoples, that this instruments and these instruments are cherished and are being spread around. And like you say, so many of these great guitars are in somebody's basement or somebody's locker, or the worst case is they buy them and they put them in controlled storage facilities as investments, like like artwork and things like that. It's crazy.
I've always had a theory that if we just had 10% more jazz guitar players, we'd instantly have world peace. So, I mean,
Well,
it,
I want to say that about. I would agree with you. I do want to say that about the Archtop Foundation. People, please, check them out, see what they're up to, follow what they're doing, encourage people to, to play the instruments. When you listen to jazz played on an archtop guitar, jazz guitar played on an archtop guitar, it is like nothing else. And I know a lot of guys, Ted Green played a telly. We all know that. But there's nothing about the way the ballistics are, and I don't mean to get too into the weeds, but the ballistics of an archtop guitar, I'm talking about the attack, the rise time, the crest factor, and the decay and the long tail of an archtop guitar is like nothing else, and you can't replicate it with a solid body and software.
Your metaphor, this one's a cannon. This guitar, like the old days, we're talking big band.
Yeah.
Obviously,
this thing is
this is
monster.
acoustic. Obviously, there's no pickup on it, and
Right.
The opportunity through the foundation and other ways as well. But people who may not normally have the chance to try this,
Right.
they're rarefied, they're expensive. You're early in your career or whatever it is such a service to allow people to experience it directly. And there's a beauty of. Is that a
It's great.
Thorell that you've got?
That is a Thorell, actually. Yes.
And then you start, it's like, you know, you're talking about drinking wine with Joe Pass. Well, it's fine wine. You know, this is kind of in that ballpark of
Absolutely.
things in life.
May I just quickly add that Joe Pass loved playing this guitar, and on this CD, Duets, there's a picture of John and Joe playing, and Joe's playing Dad's guitar.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Used on that CD. But anybody who ever picked it up, I mean, that was when Joe and John played so often. Joe would say, "I want to play yours," and he'd hand the Gibson over to John. He wanted this one because it, you know, it just roars.
Well,
So
if you think about what those things had to do, they're playing rhythm guitar in front of a whole lot of loud things called horns. I mean, horns are loud. I mean, they are freaking loud. And you get a section, a horn section going, playing those jazz swing charts. And I got to tell you, you got to, you know, to keep up, you know, you got to be able to get that, you know, get that sound out there. And those are pumps or cannons, is like you said. They
don't, you know, it's a cliche, but they don't really have wood like this anymore.
No.
They made this one, and I think the Joe Pass guitar too. You know, they're really, you know, they don't make them like they used to, so to speak, to be cliched. But I'm hoping maybe in this article that you'll have place for some photos, still images. So
absolutely.
Share what these look like up close, because I think a lot of people would be very curious about looking in detail at all of them.
Well, you can get a guitar built today out of old growth wood by some of the world's fine luthiers that are still around and doing it, and you can get instruments, but they are god awful expensive, and they don't get passed around the country from guitar player to guitar player. They don't get taken to guitar night, and you know, guys spilling. I mean, you can do it. And there are some people out there. I mean, Linda Manzer comes to mind. I mean, there are people that do it, but it's the cost is incredible. And that instrument, for all intents and purposes, was a production instrument. Even though it's the top of the line, it was a production instrument at the time. And you can't go anywhere and get a quote unquote production instrument that can. I mean, nowhere. There's nowhere on the planet. It's just that's.
Oh, the funny thing too, we're talking about Joe Pass today, is that if Joe were here on this interview, he'd be like, "Yeah, it's a great guitar. Oh, it's an Epiphone. Oh, you know, because Frank Potenza always told the story to me about when he got the DeQuisto, and he was touring with the DeQuisto guitar.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, Joe got this strap that had this belt buckle on it, and he would put the belt buckle in on top of the neck.
Oh, boy.
And fly with it. And so you know what happened? The belt buckle went up and took all the binding off the neck. So he's getting splinters from his thumb. And Frank told this story great, because Frank was so close with Joe, like Jeanne. Yeah. And so he went to Jimmy's shop and said, "Hey, you know, this is all wrong. Can you fix this?" And Jimmy's like, "Oh my gosh, the binding is all off, and this finish." And Joe looked down and said, "What's binding?" And that's the story that Jimmy DeQuisto told that story to Frank, and Frank loves telling that story because, you know, that DeQuisto, I mean, how much do you think that guitar would be worth? I mean, that's like, you know, but anyway, so it's funny we're talking about this today, and it's what an honor. And Bob, thank you for having us.
Oh no, it's
I mean, my gosh, whatever. I mean, this is so special. It's so special. It'd be like being a classic car person and going to Steve McQueen's house. You know?
Absolutely, yeah, and getting to drive the Mustang, you know,
Ferrari and the Rolex Daytona,
the whole 9 yards. So Beth, why don't you give us a wrap up, and then Jeanne, I'd like you to give us. Well, Jeanne, why don't you give us your thoughts about today and about what's going on in the world with and so forth and so on. You want to just give us a.
But I'm so grateful to you for hosting this, Bob, making this possible. I'm so grateful to Ty Danko for keeping the legacy of these two really precious guitars, precious to John, precious to me, to keep them alive and being played. When Ellen passed these guitars on to John, or the Joe Pass guitar, she said, the one thing I just wanted played, Joe wanted it played.
Right.
And that, with John gone, these guitars have sat in a closet far too long because instruments were made to be played. Music was made to fill the world, and especially beautiful guitar music on these beautiful instruments. And I'm just extraordinarily grateful to the Archtop Foundation and Ty Danko, and for Beth putting me in touch with Ty. I would never have known about it. And, just greatly appreciate both of them for making all of this happen. It would not have happened without them. And of course, John, thank you for your love and support and your friendship. You mean the world to me, and you meant the world to John. And I'm so glad that you have the legacy guitar.
I'm thrilled, and just thank you guys, and how fun. This is just a real highlight. Thank you. Yeah.
Beth, can you say a few words?
I mean, she said it all, really, Jeanne did. And, just once again, thank you so much for everything that you do in support of music and guitar.
Absolutely.
And everything we've talked about today. We all do this because we love it, and really appreciate your work too. So thank you both.
Oh, well,
Bravo.
sure. Well, I got to tell you, pretty cool stuff.
Very.
Yeah. You don't get to do this every day, and I know I certainly don't get to do this. And of all the interviews I've done a lot of them. John McLaughlin comes to mind, and I mean a lot of people. This one's going to go down as one of the ones that that I really cherish the most. It's a big deal for me, and I'm glad that I was asked, and it's a big deal for everybody, and it's a great legacy for John. The way that I don't know that it's hard when you're alive, I guess, to really understand how people feel about you. They can tell you, "Oh, I love you, you're wonderful, you're great," and all that kind of stuff, but I don't know that ever really sinks in. I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. But I don't want to leave this on a downer. I want to be very up. I want to say that John was a hell of a guy, a hell of a guitar player. It pisses me off to this day that I never got to eat the pizza. Because I understand he was a hell of a pizza maker, and that would have been incredible.
Yeah, it was unreal how good that pizza was.
Yeah, I heard. I want to thank the Art Shop Festival for bringing me in, organizing this, putting it together, for their very material financial support of Archtop Guitar, and the people that play them and make them, and it's just a tremendous thing that they're doing. And thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate it. Bob Bakert for Jazz Guitar Today with Beth Marlis and Jeanne Pisano and John Storie. Thank you, guys. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Okay. Bye-bye now.